Hey everyone, so I'm back again with another series, and this series is going to be on TypeScript. Yes, so we'll pick up TypeScript, we'll understand what is TypeScript, what is actually this programming language, why do we need TypeScript, and why TypeScript is better to use than JavaScript, right? And what are all the other benefits it actually gives us above JavaScript, right? So if we talk about TypeScript, we already have JavaScript, right? So why do we need TypeScript? So the simple reason is, first thing, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, right? So if we talk about superset, what is a superset, right? If this is JavaScript, then this is TypeScript, right? So this much portion is JavaScript. So JavaScript, all of the features of JavaScript are there in TypeScript, but TypeScript adds some more additional features, right? Some more additional features which are actually useful when you are building a highly scalable web application, right? And what do I mean by that? So what are actually the benefits that we get, right? So the first benefit and the most important benefit and the very basic benefit of TypeScript is, as its name suggests, static typing. Right? Static typing. So if you don't know what is static typing, I'll highly recommend you to learn JavaScript first, because you can go and check out my series on JavaScript, and there you will see that I've talked in detail about what is static and dynamic typing, right? So yes, the prerequisite JavaScript always, right? So you must know JavaScript before moving into TypeScript, right? So first benefit is JavaScript. Although we'll be discussing static typing, what is static typing, I'll show you that how TypeScript adds static behavior in JavaScript code, right? So we'll see that. Then second benefit that is give us is refactoring. So when we are actually writing, right, some JavaScript or basically TypeScript code, right? So TypeScript actually makes it easy for us to write clean code, to refactor our existing code, and also it helps in debugging, right? So it's easier to debug TypeScript code. We'll also see that, right? Third thing, if I talk about, are basically shorthand notations, right? So we can talk about shorthand notations. So there are various shorthand notations that you can use in TypeScript that basically makes our work easier. And if I talk about the fourth most important benefit of TypeScript is the code completion and IntelliSense, right? So these are basically all the benefits that TypeScript basically provides us, right? And the most important benefit is the static typing and code completion and IntelliSense, right? So when we will discuss about code completion and IntelliSense, then we'll basically understand what this is all about, right? So now let's just start with this writing some TypeScript code, and let's see how you can set up your development environment to get started with TypeScript. So for getting started with TypeScript, right, what do we need is, first we need Node.js, right? So if you are basically learning TypeScript, I hope you already have Node.js in your system, because when we were looking at the series of JavaScript, I already told you that how to install Node.js and how you can work around with it, right? So if you do not have Node.js, I strongly recommend you to install this. The installation guide is in the JavaScript series. The first video, you will find everything that how do you need to get started with Node.js, right? Again, I'm saying, if you don't know JavaScript, first learn JavaScript, then come to TypeScript, right? So let's get started. All right. So I'm hoping if you already have Node. If you don't, you can just go over to nodejs.org and you can download Node.js. Then this is what we are here for, right? TypeScript. So TypeScript is basically JavaScript with syntax for types, right? Just a very simple definition they have in their website. And now we are ready to try TypeScript, right? So you can also press this button, right? You can also press this button, and this button, if you press, right, you can go to this playground that they have. So here also you can write TypeScript and you can play around with whatever code you want, right? But we won't be using this playground. We'll just go back and we'll install this in our system, right? Now, are we installing TypeScript in our system? No. So basically what happens is, TypeScript is a compiled language, right? It is not like JavaScript, which is interpreted. Although it compiles the TypeScript code into JavaScript only. And for that, we actually need the TypeScript compiler, right? And the process is known as transpilation. So basically what happens is, just let me show you quickly. So if we go over here and I write TypeScript, right? So this is your TypeScript code you're writing. So it goes through a TypeScript compiler, right? So it will go through a TypeScript compiler, and this TypeScript compiler will actually compile or transpile this code into JavaScript, right? And then this code will run, right? Because our browsers don't know the format and syntax of TypeScript, right? So if you're running this on browser, basically you need to transpile this to JavaScript so that your browsers can understand the language, right? So that's why this process is needed, and we'll now be downloading the TypeScript compiler in our system. So for that, what do you need to do is, so we are basically back in VS Code, and now what do we need? We need to install that compiler. So how we can do that? So basically I've created this folder. In this folder we'll be talking all about TypeScript, right? So let's go to terminal and open this folder up, TypeScript course, right? And now what you can do is you can just run this command, which is basically npm install, right? -G for global installation, and I can just say type script, right? TypeScript. Alright, so let's install this compiler, and now you see that npm will install this for you, this whole package, and let it install, and then we'll come back. Okay, so it has basically completed installing, right? So you can read all about this, right? So just what version are we using, and what is this, right? Now, how to use this, right? So let's just write some TypeScript code now. Now, just to verify if you want that if your TypeScript compiler has installed or not, you can just say tsc and you can press -v, right? So now you see TypeScript compiler, and this is the particular version. So this version has been installed in your system right now, right? So now let's just go and let's see that how can you actually create a file, and let's say write some code first. Alright, so what I will do is I will just create one folder over here, and I will say basics, right? So this is the basics folder, right, directory, and inside this directory we'll talk a lot about our basic TypeScript stuff, right? So I'll just create one new file over here, and as you create a JavaScript file with the extension .js, here you'll just have to create the file with .ts, right, for TypeScript, obviously. So I'll just say hello.ts. So now you see that this is my TypeScript file. A TypeScript file has been created, and basically TypeScript, as I said, is a superset of JavaScript, right? So everything you can do in JavaScript, you can also do in TypeScript, right? So TypeScript is basically JavaScript, but with some additional features and type checking, right? That's simple TypeScript. So if I write over here console.log and I say hello, right? So basically this is a perfectly valid code in TypeScript also, right? But now how we can run this code? So to run this code, as I said, that we have to compile TypeScript code into JavaScript. So you have to say tsc, and now you have to say the file name. You can say hello.js. Okay, so we should go into the basics folder first. So we're in the basics folder, and now what we can do, so say that tsc, and now we need to run hello.ts, right? Alright, so now you see that this code has been transpiled, and you have a new file with the same name, but this is now a JavaScript file, right? And now basically you can run this file, right? So you see that first you write your TypeScript code, then you compile that code into JavaScript, but basically transpile that code in JavaScript, and then you can basically go and you can run this particular code like that. Right, so this is how this is basically a very simple for your first program in JavaScript. I just wrote this to show you that how our TypeScript compiles to JavaScript. Alright, so as we have seen that how basically TypeScript works, right? Now let's see the first benefit of TypeScript, that is basically static typing, right? Static typing. So to make sure, right, whenever you write your code, write it in this ts file only, because if you write your code in this hello.js file, basically JavaScript file, right, these two files are basically interlinked to each other, so they'll create conflict, right? Let me just show you. So if I write a variable marks over here, right, and I assign this to 90, right, so now I won't be able to create a variable marks over here, right? So this will give you an error. So basically you see cannot declare block scope variable marks, right? Because it already has been declared in this file. So always when you're using TypeScript, write your code in this particular file only, the TypeScript file, right? So I'll just remove this particular code from here and I'll come back to hello.ts and let's talk about static typing. Alright, so if I want to declare a variable in TypeScript, it is similar to that of JavaScript, right? But here is a little catch that you can add the type with that particular variable, right? So if I say let marks, so what I can do is I can add a colon. I can say this will be a number and I can assign this 90, right? Like that. So this variable will be of type number now. So if I try to change this to a string, right? And I say 90, right? So this is basically not allowed in TypeScript. So this is what it is meant by statically typed language, right? All right. So marks, this will not be allowed in TypeScript. And one more thing, that when you declare a variable, it is not necessary for you to give this the type, right? So you can choose or you can choose not to give this the type. So I'll just remove this. But as it has been declared with a number, right? For the first time, it has been declared with a number. So TypeScript will remember this, that okay, the marks variable is actually number type, right? So if you go over here, right, although I have not declared this, if you go over here, it will always say that let marks and this is basically number, right? So now even if you try now, you will not be able to do that. I mean, you will not be able to basically override or reassign this particular variable with a string value, right? So this is basically what statically typed means, right? So let's move on, right? So now let's just try and compile this file. Okay, so we'll just go to hello.ts, we'll open this and we'll just compile this once again, right? Because we have new code over here. So I'll just make it number, just for it gets a little easy, right? To keep track of all the variables when the type is already assigned to them, right? So I'll just compile this, and one thing that we have to see over here, right? So what do you think that when I will compile this, what do you think that this number type will be created in this hello.js file? Okay, let's try that. So we have to compile this, right? So what we'll say is we'll say tsc and we will say hello.js or ts, sorry, right? So tsc hello.ts, and now it has been compiled. And now let's go back and let's see. Okay, so there is no type at all, right? And the let keyword is replaced with the var keyword. Now why is that? This is because TypeScript actually doesn't uses ES6 specification, right? When did the let and const came? ES6, right? So TypeScript actually uses ES5. So for that reason, we are declaring the variable with let, but you see the variable are getting transpiled into the var keyword, and here you don't see any type also, right? So now we have to configure the TypeScript compiler in a way so that we can work better over here, right? So we can actually include some more specification and we can work with that, right? So in the next video, what I'll be doing is I'll be basically configuring that compiler so that our work will get easy and you will see a very clean TypeScript code, right? You will be talking about how you can set up your TypeScript compiler. If you look over here, so you see that we had some problems, right? So when we are writing TypeScript code, we're using let and all of that, but when it got compiled, it is using var, right? Then also there will be a conflict when these two files will be interlinked in the same folder, that okay, with same name we are creating variables and all of that. Plus there are a lot of other issues. So to do that, so to basically overcome all of this, what we can do is we have to configure the compiler of TypeScript, right? So to basically work better with the TypeScript, right? So what we can do is basically what we want to do over here is we want to create one separate folder where we'll be creating our TypeScript files, and when those TypeScript files will combine, basically compile, so we want to create the JavaScript files in another folder, right? So to basically maintain a separation between these two things, and also we can change the specification version, right? We can change the ES6 versions, right? So how we can do that? So first thing that we want to do is we can go over to terminal and we have to create a TypeScript configuration file, right? So how to create a TypeScript configuration file? You have to be in your root folder, right? Root folder means basically where your all files will be stored, right? So for me, this is the file. This is the folder TypeScript code with Scala. So what I'll do is I'll just create one configuration file over here. How to create or how to generate a configuration file? We have a simple command over here, that is tsc -init. That's it, right? Let's press enter, and you see you have generated one configuration tsconfig.json. You can also see that another file has been generated over here, and these are all the settings that we have inside that file, right? So now let's just go back and to the file and look at what all settings do we have and what do we need to change here, right? So if you see, we have compiler options, we have target, we have module, and we have all the other options, right? You can see there are so many options. You do not need to worry about all of them, right? So what you need to worry about is the first thing, the first option, that is target, right? So first things first, the target. So now here you can see that this is set to ES 2016, right? So this is what I was talking about when I was saying that it does not follows the latest ECMA specifications, right? It is still back in the day, right? So basically you can change this, right? So if I try to remove this and if I add ES over here, so you will see that we have a lot of options over here. For ES, right? So we have ES 2015, 16, 17, 18. So whatever version suits you, whatever version you want to try out, you can. But what I will suggest to you is please go with this ES 2016, right? Because what is there is basically this version is actually compatible with all of the browsers generally, right? So you have to use you should use basically this version, or if you want to use any other version, please feel free to try it out. All right. So I've set this to ES 2016, right, which is this most stable and most compatible version, and then I can move ahead. So basically now, as I was talking about it, I want to create a separate folder for my TypeScript files, and I want to create a separate area for my JavaScript files, right? So to do that, what we can do is you can come here in the modules settings, right? So inside this module setting, what you will find that we have first setting as a module common.js. We do not have to do anything here, right? This is good. We have to change the root directory. So I'll just uncomment this and I'll set my root directory as src, that is basically my source folder, right? And what I will do is I'll just go over here and I'll create one source folder over here. So I'll just create src like that, right? So /src. So this is my source folder, and what I want to do right now is I want to generate all of my TypeScript file inside this source folder, right? So I do not want my TypeScript file anywhere else, right? So you don't have to worry about it. Your TypeScript will itself, it will give you an error. So if I close this file now, you see we'll be facing an error soon, right? Yeah. So you see, if you go into terminal now, you will see that there is a problem. What problem it is that your hello.ts, right? Hello.ts is a TypeScript file which is not under the source script, which is basically not under the source directory, right? So it is already giving you an error. So what you want to do is you want to take your hello.ts file, you want to cut it, and you want to paste it inside the source folder, right? So now you will see that in a matter of seconds this error will move out. So let me just close all the files and let me just close the terminal. I'll just move around a little bit, and now you see the error has automatically gone, right? So basically this is to make sure that your TypeScript file are inside the source folder. Now let me just remove this JavaScript file from here, right? So that we can generate it in a separate folder. Now how to do that? So I'll just go back to TypeScript.json, basically TypeScript config.json file. So I have set the source folder over here. So this is well and good, right? Now we want to generate our JavaScript file in another folder. So for that we need to create a destination folder, or you should say a distribution folder, right? Whatever you may call it. So here you can go, and here you see that inside this emit options, right? We were talking about modules, we looked at the projects and the language and environment. Now we have to come to this emit, right? And inside this emit, you see that you have an option called out dir, that is basically out directory, right? So inside this out directory option, you have to set your destination folder or distribution folder. So I'll just say dist, right? So this is going to be our distribution folder. And now we do not need to create it from ourselves. When we'll compile our TypeScript code, the TypeScript compiler will itself create it for us, and it will it will basically generate our JavaScript code inside this folder only, right? Let me just close this file, And now let's just go and let's just compile this file. Right, so as we are in the source folder now, so you do not need to specifically say that compile this particular file, right? If you do not pass the file's name also, it will automatically compile all the TypeScript file into JavaScript for it. So you just have to say tsc, that's it. And if I press enter, so now you see a dist folder has been created, and inside this distribution folder you have hello.js. Right, and here you can go, and now you see that the version has changed. Right, previously what was happening, it was changing it into previous ES versions, so that's why there was only var. But now you see the JavaScript file also gives you the LED and basically all of the other latest ES6 features, right? And now you go into hello.ts and you see this was your file over here, right? So this is how basically what you can do is you can take care of the JavaScript version, basically a ECMAScript version. You can take care of your source and distribution directory. You can handle all of that, and now you can basically compile your TypeScript file into JavaScript file, and you can basically manage them in separate folders with this tsconfig.json, right? So this is a very good start to basically learn TypeScript and work with TypeScript, right? So this is a very good thing to do, so that you will never have any problem and you will never get into any problem when working with TypeScript, right? So everything is separate, you don't need to worry about anything, right? So this was just a setup, and after this setup we'll be moving to the core concepts of TypeScript. We'll be looking at what all do we have in TypeScript, right? All the programming stuff. So this was the configuration, the settings, the setup of it. We are going to basically discuss about all of these things. So TypeScript fundamentals, right? And here we'll be discussing all about, first thing it will be the any type. We'll understand about this thing, what is this, right? Then we'll understand all of about arrays, right? Then we have tuples, then we have enum, right? And then we will be talking about objects, and also we'll be talking about functions, right? So these are all the basic concepts that you need when you're starting with TypeScript, right? So let's just dive into our code editor and understand what are all these things, right? So let's just go into our VS Code. So before we actually move on to VS Code, let me just make a very quick comparison. I'll not say a comparison, but TypeScript adds that those particular data types over JavaScript, right? So when we talk about JavaScript, right, when we talk about JavaScript data types, or when we talk about what are all the fundamentals data types of JavaScript, so you know that we have number, we have string, we have boolean, we have undefined, and we have null, right? So these are all the primitive data types that we have in JavaScript. But when we talk about TypeScript, TypeScript adds some more things into this particular list, and those are basically any, right? So we'll discuss what is any. So I'm talking about the inbuilt data types over here, right? So number, string, boolean, these all are inbuilt, like you don't have to do anything to build them, right? So these are already inbuilt. So similarly in TypeScript, when we talk about the data types, so you will have these 5 as it is, and then you have some more data types over here. So we'll be talking about any, we'll be talking about unknown, right? Then we'll be talking about never, right? And then we'll be talking about enum, enumerated data type basically, and then we'll be talking about tuples, right? So these are all the things that we'll be talking about. All right, so let's get into our VS Code and understand what are all these things, right? So here we are back in our VS Code, and now you can see that we have this hello.ts file, right? I will remove the previous code, all right? So now what we can do over here is, let's define some variables over here, right? So what I'll do is I'll just define one variable. So I'll just say let phone, right? And I'll just give this a type of number. So this is a number. And what I will do is I'll just assign a random number over here, right? Let's just say something like that. All right, so this is basically a phone number. Then let's define one variable with the type of string. So I will just say greet, and this will be string. And let's say we say hello, right? So we have one number, we have one string. Let's define a boolean now. So is true, let me just say, or yeah, it's true. Okay, and let's just define this over here. We'll say that this is a boolean, and let's assign true over here, right? So this is how what we can do is we can define our variables, right, with their specific types. But TypeScript compiler is a very smart compiler, right? So even if I don't annotate these particular variables with their particular types, right, TypeScript compiler will be able to understand this, right? So if I remove this number from here, right, and if I just say let phone equal to a particular number, so when I'll hover over this particular variable, you see it still shows the type of this particular variable is a number, right? And if I remove the string from here, right, let's remove string, and now you see the greet variable is a string, and now let's remove the boolean. The same will be happening for the boolean value as well, right? So this is a boolean, right? So if you see that we haven't annotated the variables with their data types, but still the TypeScript compiler is able to identify what kind of data type that particular variable holds, right? So this is how it goes. But now if I just define a particular variable, right, so I just say let a, right, and I just say that this is a variable I have defined. Now what will be the type of this particular variable, right? Because we haven't initialized this variable with a particular value, right? We have just declared this variable right now. So if you go over here, so you will see this particular variable is of type any, right? This is of type any. So now what is this particular any type? Let's understand about this. So now as we have declared this variable and this is of any type, so what any type basically does is, right, it is actually basically you are losing the major feature of TypeScript over here when you are declaring variables like this with the any annotation, right? This variable is automatically taking that any kind of type, right? So that is basically to tell you that whenever you're using this variable, you can actually reinitialize this variable with any type, right? And you will have no error whatsoever, right? So if you see that if I try to declare this particular phone variable over here, right? So if I say phone, right, and if I try to provide any string inside this particular variable, I'll have an error, right? Because this is of type number, and inside of type number, inside a number kind of variable, we cannot store a string, right? So this is what the major benefit of TypeScript is. But when a variable is of type any, you're allowed to do this, right? Basically because it says that, okay, this is a variable which can take any kind of data, right? That's what it basically means, right? So a equal to 1, a equal to scalar, we can basically do this over here and we are getting no error whatsoever, right? So this is actually a very bad thing to use, right? So always try to not use any, right? Always try to declare variables with their particular types so that you will be secure, right? And you can take the major benefit of TypeScript, obviously. So using any is basically not that much recommended, right? And if I talk about in general terms, even functions, when you will define a function, so let's just say we want to define a function name as hello and we want to receive a greeting over here, right? Or let me just reverse that, right? So we want a function greeting, right, and we are expecting hello to in our parameter, and I'll just say console.log hello, right? So what will happen over here is, just look at this, right? When you are passing the parameter over here, it is again an error, right? Because, and let's hover over this hello and see what is the error. It says hello implicitly has any type, right? So basically even functions in TypeScript will not allow a parameter to go with any type, right? So you always have to specify the type for this parameter. So if I just say this will be a string, so now the error will be gone and you will be able to execute this function, right? But there is a catch that if you want to do this, right, this is basically not recommended, but just to play around with this, I'll just show you one thing. So as you see that this hello will give an error now because this has any type, and no parameter in TypeScript can have any type. But you can change this if you go into this config file, and inside this config file, if you go over to emit, right, or let me just go down, right, sorry, in the type checking, right, if you go over to type checking, you will see this particular setting over here, that is no implicit any, right? So if I just remove the comment from here and if I make this false, right, so right now it is checking for any, that if there is any parameter that has any type, so it will not allow this. But now as you go back, you will see that that error is gone, right? So now you can use the any type, now you can use the parameter with any type, but this is not recommended. This is a very bad thing to do, right? So let's let it just stay to true. Alright, this was just a fun thing to do. over here, right? So the error is back again, and now you can just go and you can assign a type and it will be gone, right? So this is what basically the any type is. Just for your knowledge, avoid using this, right? Alright, so let's move ahead, and now we'll be discussing about arrays in TypeScript. So I should basically create another file, or okay, let's discuss arrays in this file only, right? So here we were discussing about any type. So I'll just say any type, right? So this is basically your any type, and now let's just move ahead and we will discuss about arrays. Alright. So basically, as in JavaScript, how the array works, pretty much similar. You can use arrays in TypeScript as well, right? So if I want to create an array which contains even numbers, right? So let's just say this array is of even numbers. So what I will do is I'll just throw in even numbers over here. So I'll just throw in 2, 4, right? I'll just throw in 6, 10, and 12. Right, like that. So here we have a very simple array which contains even numbers. So this is basically a JavaScript array, and this is perfectly valid when you're working with TypeScript. But when you're working with JavaScript, one thing is there that we can also add a string over here, right? This is right, and this is a perfectly valid JavaScript array. But now we are talking about TypeScript over here. Now we have the benefit to actually assign types to everything that we define, right? So how you can do that? So here also, in a similar way, we have to define that this particular array has a type of number, right? This array is a type of number, and because it is an array, we have to basically write the array sign, that is basically double brackets, right? So now you see that this number type of array will take all the numbers, right? Will take all the numbers, but it is showing error in the scalar value, right? This is basically string, it will not take this in, right? So let's just remove this, and if you hover over this, you see that this is a type of this is an array of type number, right? So this is how you can define your arrays with actually a specific types, right? But now if you just define an empty array, right? If you just define an empty array, so I'll just say odd numbers, right? And now you just say that this is empty, right? So now what will happen? Yes, this array will take the any type, right? This array will take the any type, and here you can again store any value that you would like, right? So do not use the variables with the any types, right? So just to keep your code secure, right? So this is basically how simple TypeScript arrays work. So arrays were pretty straightforward. So now what we'll be talking about, another data type that we have inside TypeScript, and that are basically tuples, right? So let's talk about tuples. So tuples are basically, if you say a group, or you can say basically it is always recommended to use only two things for tuples, right? Basically two data for tuple, but there can be multiple data you can store at once, right? So suppose that you want to store a particular person with a particular ID, right? So how you can do that? So you can just say let person, right? Let person, and now what you can do over here is, so a person, what a person will have ID, that means ID will be in number, and then name will be in string, right? So that is how these two things will go. So you can basically do this. So you can say number and you can say string, like that, right? And now what you can do, you can just create one array and you can store the number over here. So I just say 1 2 3 4 5 6, something like that, and now you can store the string over here. So let me just say my name, right? So this is how basically a tuple will work, right? So if you see number and string, we are storing these two values over here. So a number is the first element and the string will be the second element. So this is how basically you can create a tuple, right? So it is not generally necessary that only two data can be stored over here. You can store multiple data, right? So if I store something in, if I want to store something in Boolean, I can store that as well, right? So I can just say true over here, and this is perfectly fine, right? But if we go over to this tuple, if we compile this, right? So you know that JavaScript did not have anything like this, right? So basically, when this particular code will compile, this tuple will compile into an array only, right? So let me just show you. So what I'll do is I'll just comment this code out as well, right? And I'll just run this much code, and let me just comment this as well, right? Let's focus on tuples first. So what I will do is I'll just open this with integrated terminal and I'll just try to compile this. So I'll just say tsc and the file has been compiled. So if I go over to hello.js now, right? So let's just remove this, and now you see that this was the tuple, right? This was the tuple we were talking about. So this tuple has compiled in a array, right? Which you can see first is the number, second is the string, and third is the true, right? So basically this is how it works. So this actually brings a loop, right? This actually brings a loophole in TypeScript, because as this tuple is working as an array behind the scene, what we can do over here is we can say person.push, right? And this method is valid over here, and now what we can do is we can try and we can push anything over here. So let me just put some number again, right? So I'll just put some number again, and now what I will do is I'll just try and I'll console.log basically person, right? So now you see, if I try to compile this code once again, right? I'll just compile this code once again and let's say tsc, right? So this code has been compiled, and now if I go back to hello.js, so you see basically we have pushed this particular code, and now if you want to see this person, right? Now if I want to see this person, so I'll just have to run this particular file that is in my dist, right? So I'll just say node, and the name was hello.js, I guess. Yes, hello.js. So now you see that the number that we actually pushed has also been added in this particular array, right? So this is basically a loophole that TypeScript needs to fix, right? So whenever we are making a tuple, we should not be allowed to use this push or pop method over here, because that way we can actually manipulate the data, and which is not so secure, right? So this is a very little, not little, basically it can turn into something big, right? If this is not taken care of, right? So always remember, when you're creating any tuples, do not use any array methods over here that can manipulate this particular tuple, right? So yeah, so that's what I wanted to show over here. So these are, so this is basically a tuple, right? So I'll just keep this as it is for your knowledge, right? So now you can go and you can play around with tuple arrays, and you can try this particular any data type, how this works and all of that, right? So basically in this particular video we discussed about what is the any type, what are arrays, and what are tuples, how they compile, and all of that, right? So let's move forward. So up till now we have talked about the built-in types in TypeScript, right? So we have any type, we have arrays, we have tuples, and all of that. So now what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the fourth built-in type that TypeScript has, and that is basically enum, right? So what is actually enum? So before moving on to enum, let's understand that what purpose it will actually solve, right? So let's suppose that you are going to Starbucks, right? So I hope you have been to Starbucks. So in Starbucks, what they do is they have these three sizes for their cups. So one is basically small, and then you have grande and you have venti, right? So this is their sizes. So if we talk about these sizes, so if I ask you to define, okay, I want to define these three sizes and just index them, right? So how will you do this? So if I say small, so I'll just say that small is 1, suppose. Let grande, this is 2, and let venti, this is 3. Right? So this is how basically I have given them all the values. But if I talk about that, if I want all of these values in a set, right? So I want a set of all of these values, so where I can just look and I can access any value that I want, right? So what I can do is I can create a enum, right? So let's just say I will go and I'll just create one enum over here. So let's say enum, right? This will be in small enum, and for what purpose I want to create this data type? Size, right? Let's just say size, right? So enum size, and what are all the sizes that I have? I have small, grande, and venti, right? So how we can create this? So I'll just say small, or let's just use this Pascal casing over here, because when you are defining basically an enum, you are recommended to use the Pascal case, right? Pascal case means the first letter will be in capital, right? So small, and second one was grande, and the third is venti, right? This is how I have basically provided this particular enum, which is named size, with these three values, small, grande, and venti. So now what will happen is, if I create one variable, and if I say let my size, right, equal to, and I just assign basically this variable as size dot let's say venti, right? And now if I go and I try to console log this particular variable, that is my size, so what should I be getting? I should be getting this 20, but this is not the value, right? This is basically when we are talking about objects, if you are familiar with objects in JavaScript. So what happens is that you have to provide a value, right? So similar to that, this is here a variable, right? If you see, this is a variable and you are providing a value, right? So this is also a variable that you have to provide some value. But in TypeScript, what happens is values are automatically provided to these enums unless you are providing them from your side, right? So basically, if I talk in this default condition, so you will see that the small will be 0, grande will be 1, and venti will be 3, right? So I'll just comment these variables out and let's just check this out. So what I will have to do is I'll have to just compile this file once. So I'll just say tsc, and now in the destination folder, you see, yeah, this is basically the code that has been generated. You don't have to worry about this right now. We just have to run this code right now, right? So I'll just say node hello.js, and now you see the value is 2 because if you go back to the TypeScript, you see that 0, 1, and 2, right? So this particular value contains 2. So this is not compulsory that you name it like this as I have done, right? So you can basically create for anything and you can give any values to it. So let's suppose that I give this small a value of 2, right? So what will happen is automatically if the first value is 2, so the second and third will be this will be 3 and this will be 4, right? So automatically it basically assigns the value. So now if I want to console log my size, which is basically the 20 size, so what I should get in the output, 2, 3, and 4. So I should get 4 right now, right? So let's just do that. So node index.js, okay, error. Oh, sorry, node hello.js. Our file's name is hello.js, right? So okay, so we haven't compiled this. So let me just quickly compile this once again. tsc. This has been compiled, and now let's just run this file once again, and I'm hopeful that we'll see 4 now, right? Hello.js, and you see 4 is the value right now. So this is how basically your enum works, right? So there can be many more examples. Like if we talk about so let us take another example over here, and this time we'll be working with strings, right? Yes, you can assign string values to your enum data type as well, right? So here we have small, grande, venti, which are basically taking numbers right now, right? We can also assign string values. So let's just say I want to create an enum for flavors, right? Flavors of maybe chips, wafers, right? So let's do that. So if I go over here and I say enum, and I want to create an enum for flavors, right? So enum flavors, and now we can create this similarly, right? So I'll just say first flavor, I'll just say second flavor, and I'll just say third flavor, right? So in this case, basically this will take numbers because by default it is set to that, but 0, 1, and 2, right? But we can also provide string values over here. So let me just provide some values over here. So I'll say PDP maybe, right? And let me provide some for second, and let's say cheese onion, right? And let's just provide a flavor for the third flavor, and let me just say, oops, yeah, this will be tangy tomato, I guess, whatever, right? So this is how basically you can provide some string values to your enum data types as well. And now you can go over here and you can just try this out. So I'll just say my flavor, right? Everything will be similar, and here you can pick from flavors, and I want the second flavor because that's my favorite, right? So flavors.second, and then now you can go and you can console log basically my flavor. So we should get the second flavor, which is basically cheese onion. So we can go and we can compile this, right? We'll have to compile this once more. So tsc, the file has been compiled. Now we can open this in integrated terminal. We can just say node hello.js, and now you have 4 and cheese onion, right? So this is basically how you can use the enum. And okay, let's come back to JavaScript now. So you see that this code has been generated, right? So this basically is an iffy, if I call it, right? So this is basically an iffy. So this is a function which takes size, right? And here you have your array, right? Which is basically, if you talk about this, this is a nested array, right? And it has small, grande, venti, it has all the flavors, right? So you don't have to worry about this code at all, right? You just have to write whenever you are creating enum, like this, right? Just remember that when you're writing enum, right, this will compile into this kind of code. But there is a way that we can avoid this. So basically what we can do is we can just use the const keyword with our enums, right? So whenever we'll make these enums as const, so now if I go and if I recompile this code, right? So if I say tsc, the code has been compiled, and now if I go back to hello.js, you see that the code has been shortened, right? So basically now you have my size 4 and my flavor cheese onion, and this is the code right now, right? So basically this is how what we can do is we can create enums in TypeScript, right? Alright, so this is all about enums. So now we'll be moving to understand that how functions they work in TypeScript, right? So if I talk about functions, so functions in function in TypeScript are very secure if you compare functions in JavaScript, right? So let's see how they are secure and what all do we need to understand functions in TypeScript. There are a lot of things to understand above JavaScript functions, right? So basically TypeScript functions, they basically are JavaScript functions, but they are very much secure, right? So let's see how you define a function in TypeScript. So the syntax is similar. I will say the same syntax that you will use, right? So you just have to say the function keyword, then you say check for greater than, right? Let me just create a function named as check greater than, which will basically we will just pass one digit over here, and it will check with another digit that if it is greater or not, right? So that's that simple function that we'll write. So this is basically function check greater than, and this is perfectly a valid function, right? Now what we want to pass over here is we want to pass basically a digit, right? A digit. So we'll just pass a digit as a parameter. But now you see this parameter is giving us an error, and this is because whenever you're using a function in TypeScript, you always have to specify the type of the parameter. Basically you'll have to always annotate the type of the parameter that is going to be passed over here. So what I'll have to say, we are passing a digit. This will mean that this will be a number kind of data type, right? So you just have to pass number over here, like that, right? So now you see there are no errors, right? One more thing, if I hover over this particular function, you see that the return type of this function is currently void, right? Because we are not returning anything from inside this function. But if I go over here and if I return something from here, so let me just say I return 1, right? So 1 is a number. Now if you hover over this function, you will see now the return type has changed and it has become number, right? So this is how basically the type checking for your parameters, the type checking for the return type, everything is done by TypeScript, right? And not only this, what you can do is you can actually specify what this function's return type should be, right? So if I go over here and if I say colon, and I will just have to say number, right? So now what I'm signifying, what this signifies is basically this function will have a return type of number as well, right? So if I go over here and if I try to return something in a string format, so I'll just say return my name, right? So now you see that this will cause an error because we have already specified this function should return a number, right? So this is basically how this function is very much secure, because we are actually passing a number. We can specify the return type over here and we'll never be having any such error, right? Whenever we are working with a TypeScript function, right? So this is how basically you can create a function over here. So I'll just say return 1, and now this is a perfectly valid function, right? And if you don't want to return anything, you can always just say void, and we will just have to remove this, because void is basically when we are not returning anything from a function, right? So this is how basically you can create a function, right? So you can make your function more secure, right? So you will be thinking that, okay, this is a secure function, this is a secure enough function, how can we make this more secure? So let me just show you. So if I just type over here return 1, right, and let me just change this type to number, right? This is a perfectly valid function. Now what I want to show you is that, see, we're not passing any parameter over here, right? We're not passing any parameter. So if I just go over here and if I just call this function, right? So I can call this function without passing any parameter. So I haven't given any digit over here. So what I can do over here is I can go to tsconfig and I can basically turn on a setting which will also give error when there is a parameter expected, but we are not passing any parameter, right? So if I go to tsconfig and here, if we just go into this type checking, right, and here you can see that there is an option of no unused parameter, and if I remove this, right? So no unused parameter is set to true right now. So if I go back to hello.ts, you will see that, let me just comment this out, and now you see that this digit, right, this digit has a warning over here. So if you go over here, you will see that digit is declared, but its value is never used, right? So this is also a warning that can come up if you basically keep this particular setting on, right, to make your function more secure. So let's basically now use this particular parameter over here. So let me just say that my number is 50,000. I just want to check my digit with 50,000. So I'll just say if my digit is greater than 50,000, then basically I have to return the digit, right? I have to return the digit, right? Basically, if it is greater than 50,000, I'll just return digit. Or let's just make this more clear. So what I will do is I'll make this a Boolean value, right? So digit will be a number and the return type should be Boolean, right? Return type should be Boolean, so that you can return basically if digit is greater than 50,000, we can just basically return true from here, right? Simple as that. But right, so we'll have to just keep this inside the if condition, right? So if digit is greater than 50,000, return true, fair enough, right? Let me just keep this inside the if block like that, right? But you see, this seems like a very valid code, but if you look at this particular Boolean value here, the return type, you will see that this is again showing an error, right? And what is this error? This says that function lacks ending return statement and return type does not include undefined. Now what actually is this error, right? We haven't encountered any this kind of an error when we are working with JavaScript. But here what you have to do is, if you remember that JavaScript always returns undefined, right? Whatever it runs, it always returns undefined. If you are forgetting that, let me just quickly show you. So here basically I'm in the console, right? I'll just go into the console and just write a very basic JavaScript code. I'll just say console.log and I'll just say hi. Right, this is right, and let me just press enter over here. So you see hi, but after that we are also getting undefined. So this is one behavior of JavaScript, that after providing an output, right, there must be something known as undefined, which should be able to which should be there, right? So that is basically the error which we are encountering over here, that we have not defined undefined thing over here, right? So we have to do that. So how can we do that? So basically the thing over here is that if this condition is not true, that means if this if block didn't run, it will return undefined, right? So to tackle that, what can we do? We can go again into our ts.config files, and here you can see that this is one setting over here that says no implicit returns, right? No implicit returns. So we just have to basically set this to true. I have removed this comment and this setting is right now on. So we can go back, and now what we can do is we can just say that if this thing doesn't work, just return false, right? And now you see we have no such error, right? Our basically the return type is not giving any error, the function is not giving any error, and now we are actually good to use this function. Now we can actually make this function a little more secure, right? So there is no end to security with TypeScript, and that's why basically the developers who are basically developing everything in JavaScript tech stack, they're actually using TypeScript to do that, because this is very much secure. So another secure point is that if I declare a variable over here, let me just say I have declared a variable as let x or let a, right, something like that. And now if I don't use this inside this function, right, if I don't basically use this particular variable inside this function, so this will also give me an error. So for that, what you have to do, you just have to go to tsconfig and you have to basically set this particular value to true. That means no unused locals. And now if I set this to true, if I go back over here and if I'm not using this, I'll get a warning that a is declared, but its value is never read, right? So basically this is a warning over here. So now if this warning comes, you can always handle this, right? So you can always use this variable where you have to use it, or you can just remove it like that, right? Simple as that. So basically this is how a function in TypeScript is very much secure than a function in JavaScript, right? And now if you want to call this, so you can just say check greater than, and now you can pass any number. I'll just pass 20,000 over here, right? So 20,000 is not greater than 50,000, so it will return false, right? So I'll just catch this in a variable. So I'll just say let result. I'll just console log this result over here. Like this, right? Simple as that. One thing more, in TypeScript, if you are providing one parameter, you can only pass one argument, which is not the case in JavaScript. In JavaScript, you can provide parameter, you cannot provide parameter, whatever you like you can do, right? And you can pass any number of arguments, JavaScript will not care. But in TypeScript, this is a very strict rule that whenever you're passing one parameter, you can only pass one argument for that one parameter. If I now go and if I try to pass another parameter, right? So basically, now if you want to compile this won't compile, right? So if I just go into hello.ts and I want to compile this tsc, so you will see that basically expected one argument but got two, right? So we cannot pass the argument more than it is expected, right? We just have to pass one argument. So I can just pass one argument and now I think it will be good to compile, right? tsc, it has compiled, and now we can go to hello.js. You can see one function is created which basically checks greater than, and now we can run this file over here. So I'll just say node hello.js again, and now you see false. Good. So this is how basically you can create your function in TypeScript. Always remember to basically turn on all of these settings, right? If you want your function working very securely, right? So this was the video on all about functions in TypeScript. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and we're coming with more awesome content. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.